Paul, to start things off with a day off yesterday, is today the conclusion to week one, or is the start of week two for you? How do you kind of look at where you are on the calendar?
So it was this. It was the start of week two. Well, where we wanted to bring the elements from week one and then revisit them. This week will be very similar days like this on three, and then special teams days on two of them. But each kind of block will bring stuff. We'll bring stuff into the next block. So we look at this as the second block of 5 days.
We talked to Jack Roslovic earlier today. Where has he grown in confidence in your mind to be able to start this playoff series on that line with Lowry and Kopp, knowing that they're going to be going up against pretty good players?
The hesitation that a young player has in the reads eventually comes out of their game. And when that comes out, you start to see their natural skill sets. He's a very, very quick player, and he can make plays with the puck. And half of a big piece of being a real strong defensive player is making plays, making smart plays for sure with the puck, understanding there's maybe a little bit different risk when you're playing against the other team's elite offensive players, so you make a safer play, but he can make those plays. So, you go back to 2 or 3 years ago, Jack's just kind of coming in, but there was a stretch of time where, and it was Kopp, Lowry, and Armia, and they played together, played against the other team's best, but generated a whole lot of offense. And Joel had a good set of hands on him, and so does Jack. So there's some offense we think that line can create. It clearly will be different looking than the other two lines, but there's offense there, and Jack has the ability to finish.
Thanks.
Hi, Coach. Tim Campbell, NHL.com. I'm wondering if you would mind sharing a bit of your thinking about why no scrimmage today and why not a lot of scrimmaging so far.
We had a different set of circumstances coming in that we hadn't opened for phase two, and we put everyone through a 7-day quarantine off the ice. And because of that, we didn't want to scrimmage in our first 3 or 4 days. We wanted to get them up to speed. There was a scrimmage. We'll block scrimmage now instead of running the entire practice as a scrimmage. You put 3 lines on each team, and if you run a long block of scrimmage time, it deteriorates very quickly, and you lose the pace and the intensity. So if you watch the end of our practice today, it was the biggest minute drill that we did. It was just in the end zones. That's a heavy grind drill, but also for the offensive group, right? They're trying to score goals. So we're kind of almost component scrimmaging. You'll see scrimmage come in on day 3 and day 5, but instead of the 40-minute scrimmage that we ran the other day, we'll be looking at 20 minutes of 5-on-5, and then we will add special teams into that. So we don't have a pure day where we're coming out and scrimmaging. Part of that is my own, how it fits into our plan. It's also in conversation with the players. They all feel that scrimmages at times create as many bad habits because you can't finish checks and you don't block shots and you don't do some of the things that you would see. Maybe you finish checks, but it's not the same. So we don't want to develop any bad habits. We want to build this week. We'll do as many even strength. We call them battle drills, but they're adversarial, and that there's no easy ice to play on. We'll do quite a bit of that this week.
Okay, thanks. Also wondering, Calgary has a pretty established quality defense group. So wondering what you think Patrick Kane is going to have to do to find his chances against a pretty seasoned group.
I don't know that that transfer that's specific just to Calgary. I'd agree, but when you look at the Central Division teams, St. Louis, parts of Dallas does. We got a fairly good grind over here in the Central Division. He's used to that hockey, so the best thing what they can do as a line is probably more important. When Nick Ehlers skates, and you watch today's practice, when he skates like that, he just opens up ice, right? So Nicky's got to have a piece of that. Cody's just real smart, real strong. He's got a good set of hands, so he's in on every battle and fight. What Patrick will need to do is find that hole, be involved in the offense and be involved in the grind, because there's going to be an awful lot of that in this series, and then find the hole. Those other two guys will be able to find them. I guess a better and simpler answer is I don't think he has to change against this defensive core, because we face some pretty solid ones over here in the West on a nightly basis.
Thanks, Coach.
Morning, Paul. It's Ted Wyman here from the Sun. I know you can't talk about why players are absent, etc., but are you grateful for having been able to work with almost all of your roster so far? Because there's a couple other teams that are missing as many as 9 players.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also a function of we knock on wood and fingers crossed, we've got our hockey team in the best NHL city for a lot of reasons, but for health and safety. Manitoba's done a great job. Winnipeg's done a great job of people adhering to sensible rules to stay safe. In our hockey club, we've certainly encouraged that. And you don't get to see what goes on in our locker room down here, but it's extensive, right? I mean, it's I don't have a mask on, but when this camera goes on, my mask goes on, and I'm wearing it 100% of the time as we move through the room. There's just a lot of things that we've done, and I think that's helped our players understand how serious it is. After they walked in on day one, I went, oh my God, the stalls were getting sterilized every time somebody's in it. All of the things that they see, they continue to do that. So we kind of looked at it as we would take the hit maybe of losing a slight competitive advantage early by putting everybody through the quarantine, even if they weren't coming from a high-risk area, and maybe being a little bit behind it on day 1 or 2, because the health of this group, that all of these players coming in are coming in negative, they all understand they're all negative, then we can have our whole group working the entire time. Because right about you don't want to be off the ice right now.
And just one more question. How does Jensen Harkins fit into the mix of things right now with this group?
I'm a big Hark fan, and I don't want Hark. So, I mean, you can take a look at that group and take a pretty good look at the 4 lines and have an idea of what I've got structured, and if everybody stayed healthy, what it would look like. But being the extra forward necessarily in the main group, you get way fewer reps. And what he's doing with the second group, we got 9 guys out there. Those guys are touching the puck an awful lot. So he's going to come in and out of the main groups. I have him. This is not a depth chart, the groups. And I would leave it as saying as I've got lots of confidence in what he can do coming into our lineup.
Thank you.
Hey, Paul, it's Taylor Allen from the Winnipeg Free Press. What's something that you learned about your team in this first week of camp here?
Yeah, they're in better shape than I thought they'd be. So, and you know what, when I talked to the guys on a pretty regular basis and certainly amped up the conversations as we got closer to coming in, and they were all committed to it. They were all working, but they weren't working in a way that they normally would. So there's an uncertainty in my mind of what I'm going to get back on the ice. And I thought that in the first 2 or 3 days, we purposely didn't hammer them. And it allowed the guys who hadn't been on the ice a whole heck of a lot time to catch up to speed, to the point that maybe the 2 or 3 guys that I knew couldn't find ice, they weren't being lazy, they just couldn't get ice in the locale that they were in. They look good now. So we got a bunch of guys. There's still a few guys that have a ways to go, but we have time. But we got a bunch of guys that are moving now, and you can't tell that it's not a normal regular season. For me, they'll argue that their hands maybe aren't right there, but their bodies are moving right.
And in week 2 here, what kind of improvements are you hoping to see, and what are you kind of keeping a close eye on?
So the second block is we start working on special teams, and we'll have the heavier of even strength drills for this week. So I'm looking for what happens in the one-on-one battles, right? That we're getting the intensity to a right level, that we're technically right with our sticks, and we're not taking penalties, and we're not doing those things because we're not right in how we're approaching the drill. So I'm looking for heavy days, off days. I mean, we're going to work our power play and our penalty kill pretty extensively tomorrow. I'm not particularly concerned about efficiency on it. We just want to get back into the rhythm on it. And the drills and the practices are going to be heavy enough this week that they may not have a whole lot going on the ice tomorrow. And then we'll transition to speed, and I'll look for all those things to come together in the last week.
And just the last one for me, what kind of growth would you like to see from Jack Roslovic's games, maybe compared to last year's playoffs?
So I liked his playoffs, by the way, in the last year. His playoffs were the bright spot of the season. So I'm a Jack Roslovic fan. I like what he can do. This guy can become a two-way player, and I'm excited about where he's going. I liked his playoffs last year. This experience, he looks better now in this camp than he would have at our camp at the start of the year, right? He's got a whole bunch more games, so he gets the systems, and it's not even the systems. He gets the NHL game better now, and his reads are faster, his routes are better, and what you're looking for from these young guys is it's that idea of turning pro. And I've said this a bunch of times. These really highly skilled players come in and they give you one game out of four that's a complete game, and they get a bunch of points, and we're all excited. But those other three games are pretty rough for the coach for trying to win. And as they get going and they get older and more mature, so the other end of the extreme would be Blake Wheeler in his 30s now. You know, you're going to get a handful of games over the course of the year where the guy's off, right? So those are the two extremes. What you're looking for your young players is to get closer to that where their game looks the exact same every night. Whether they put pucks in the net or they don't, their process is right. They're physically strong enough, mentally tough enough to play in an NHL 82-game season. Jack's moving toward that. I'm happy with how he looks out here.